And I think I'm live. Hello, everyone. Hello, hello. Welcome, welcome. So, I'm really happy about today's stream and excited because it's something that I've been very, very much looking forward to painting. So, the returned keywords, they're finally here. So, I will be working on 2 Urnbearers from the hashed corpse box. And, when I saw it for the first time, for some reason, I read it as hashed corpse, but it's copse, so a small group of trees, not a dead body, which would be oddly appropriate for this one, anyways. So the models that I will be working on are 2 wonderfully sculpted Urnbearers. They are like mini dioramas, really, really lovely models. There is also this guy that comes in the box, the white eyes, who is pretty creepy. It's a creepy guy on 40mm base. But I thought that I would also use this opportunity, since I have the stream, and open some boxes. And let me start with Ruins of a Lost Age. So I received them only yesterday, so they are brand new, and I want to show them to you guys, share my initial impressions. Maybe I'll remove the white piece of paper that serves as backdrop here. So here they are. I will stop moving it in a second, and we have Ruins of a Lost Age, which is the title box with Theory, the architect, Anselli engine, and Castor Fervent. And obviously, I'm mostly looking forward to painting Castor here. So let me unpack it. So the cards go out. I don't really use cards anymore. But, well, let's have a look. So here's the Castor, the big guy. Too many pieces, only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 pieces for such a large model. He's pretty big. And let's see the details on the face. Clearly an angry guy. Maybe I'll put back the white backdrop. Should get more clarity of vision when I move it closer. Yeah. All right, there it is. So that's the Castor. Pretty big. I would have thought that he would be even bigger for a size 4, but I'll have to wait until I've assembled him. There's Theory. It's 8. Yeah, 8 pieces. Pretty, looking good. Then we have another one, which is the engine, which looks like it will be fun to assemble, because those are like rotating circles inside the circle and plenty of light effects going on, and might end up painting this one on one of the future streams, who knows. The next box I have is Deep in the Dark. Oh yeah, I believe the engine, the Atlas figure. Yeah, that's looks like fun. So let me just unwrap the foil. And I also want to give a big shout out to one particular store, which is located in Belgium. And the name of the store is, and pardon my French and my horrible pronunciation, it's Levi Suel. I have no clue how to pronounce it properly. I'm not even going to pretend I'm trying, but it's a store in Belgium. Hey, good choices. And the guy who runs it, David, big shout out to the guy. He makes sure that Malifaux and generally Word products are available fast on the non-UK part of Europe. All right, Nekima, so that seems like a natural expansion to you. And that's Atharak, the guy who I think is becoming my crutch model for any kind of list that I have with Castor. And those are the Cavern Nephilim, so the thin, small ones. They are way smaller than. I mean, the spread of wings is pretty big, but their bodies are just tiny compared to their big Nephilim cousins. Let me just try to zoom in on some details here. It's hard to do it when there are so many moving pieces, but well, they don't look too complicated to assemble. And the henchman is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pieces only. Yeah, they are narrower, way thinner than the original ones. And finally, the Castor core box. I mean, it's super blurry, but it will become stable and in focus once I've opened it, and once I have just the sprues with me. Alright, so that's the cards are out, and let's have a look here. So here is what do we have here? Castor. He looks big. He looks pretty tall. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 pieces. So not too bad. And the details on just the muscles. Not sure if you can see that very clearly, but his muscles look very well defined. And the facial expression is really mean. And even the details on some kind of ornament that hangs from his waist is just super detailed. So I think that so far I'm most impressed with this one. Really good miniature. Now we have the blade, the living blade. So that comes with many pieces. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and this tiny one will be fun to find the proper place for. So those are 3, I believe, young Nephilim, which are partly submerged in the magical effects. So that's the sword. Yeah, cool stuff. And one more. Those are the minions. Well, first of all, let's have a look at the Gwill. Yeah, that's a lot of pieces for one box. So that's Gwill. Gwill is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So not too bad. He's like this walking tree. Even has mushrooms growing on the top. Let's try to see the face. The face looks very nice. Really neat level of detail. And you can see that he's kind of grinning. Really impressed with the level of detail on the face in particular. And those are the minions. The minions in the box. So the blood vessels. So the scheme runners who can teleport. They seem pretty straightforward. Like 4 or 5 pieces each. Maybe a few more on this one. But they look like well-designed 3D puzzles. But even those medallions that they have, they seem to have some nice detail on them. So pretty cool stuff. But I would say that let me just compare 2 versions of Castor since I have them handy. Okay, so that's titled Castor versus standard Castor, and you can see, just compare the chest of Castor Fervent to Castor Awakened. Haha, yeah, it bites. Oh yeah, it can cause some damage. So Let's see if I can get some zoom here, some focus here. These ones. I just want to make sure you guys see clearly the difference between two versions of Castor. So that's the fervent, that's the awakened version. All right, there is the focus, perfect. And you can see that the wings are much larger. Just look at the chest. If I put them next to one another, you can clearly see that the title version is way, way bigger. I think it's the pose that he has. He's not standing tall like the awakened version. So that might be the key difference here. And just look at the face. Same miniature, but looks like he's grown. So the heads are, this head is, well, bigger because it's a well-nourished version of Castor. So that's the overview. If you'd like me to get back to any of them and showcase them again, just let me know in the chat and I will do that. But for now, I'll be moving on to these two characters. So those are the Urnbearers. And oh yeah, he was quite hungry. And once again, big shout out to leviswilk.com, which is the store in Belgium that stocks Malifaux pretty fast and can be relied on for excellent customer service and fast delivery. So for them, I will be using the pale white on the clothes. There are some ornaments on them. Let me just bring a solid brush. That's one I will use. All right, so the clothes will be pale white. That's the name of the store. Thank you so much. It's double thumbs up from me for sure for excellent customer service. Really, really impressed with how well they operate. So I want to also show you a nice trick because there is some blood magic going on, and it clearly flows out of the urn that they're holding because it's some kind of ritual that they are performing. And the wings will be dark, the horns will be brown, and it may seem like the faces do not have that much detail, but actually I'm pretty sure that this one has a mask, like a golden mask. And let's have a look at the other one. I'm not sure. I need to look at the artwork in the app because I've placed my card somewhere. So I'll just have a quick look at the card of the Urnbearer. I need to look at the second one. Yeah, clearly those are masks. So those are masked figures. So good to know. So I think that pale white, some gold here, and maybe the same type of gold on the mask. Then the horns with some kind of warmer brown, pale skin on the human, and some blood effects going on here. So that's the plan for tonight. And one more miniature that came in that box was this guy, so the white eyes. And let me just bring up one very special thing that I will use today, which is the splash gel. Actually, I may use a different one. Sorry for disappearing for a second, but I needed to literally dive under my desk for that. So that's the one I will start with. And this is a neat trick of how to sculpt effects like flame or some kind of substance that you want to be visible. So what I will do is I will just grab it, apply it directly, because this is this is extremely thick. So it's called flaming yellow. And what I will do is I will what I want to do is to add a little bit more of this blood effect, because it seems to me like there could be a little bit more. So I'm just essentially applying it, allowing it to travel from my brush onto the miniature, and that way I will kind of try to replicate what's already on the miniature. So this flow of substance from the urn onto the face of this poor guy. Then maybe add a little bit more, and definitely a little bit more around the waist area, because I want him to be well incorporated into the base. That's why I will have this kind of, whatever it is, poison blood, and I will have it flowing to the bottom of the base. So that's a neat trick, quick and easy method of making sure that you do not need modeling putty, you do not need green stuff or anything like that. All you need is just brush and this splash gel effect. This is actually from Green Stuff World. They have a number of like more specialist products that serve specific purpose, and that's just one example of such product. So that's going to do it for this one. It's like blood boiling around him. That's the idea. And now maybe let's see about the other guy. It will dry within the next half an hour, give or take. Now the next guy, again, I want to add some of this splash effect around the lower section, because he's getting drenched in this poisonous, whatever it is, blood or some kind of substance. And I'm just trying to follow along the lines of what's already sculpted on the miniature and just adding a little bit more on top of that. Maybe a little bit more here as well, closer to the midsection. And I think that will do it. Maybe a little bit more just flowing out of the base that he's holding, of the urn that he's holding. And that will do it for this guy. And one thing you can also do if you use this splash gel and you want to make sure when it's actually solid, just put some of it, maybe just regular blood, just regular black blood. What you can do, because the way it's supposed to work, you just put some amount of it and you drag it upwards, and that's the easiest way of really sculpting flame-like effects. And what you can do is you can just leave a little bit of it on your palette, and then you will know precisely when it's becoming stable, when it's dry and no longer bendy, and then you can comfortably paint it. So now that's out of the way, I will focus on the miniature, and I will start with an overbrush just to bring up the details a little bit more. I will use off-white to begin with, just to get a good sense of how to place the highlights and how the contrast paints will interact with the slightly brighter zones that I will create on the miniature right away. And I'll just try to position my camera a little bit better. There it is. So what I'm doing now is just giving it an overbrush. And what I mean by overbrush is just the miniature was first base coated with pure black, and then I sprayed some white at an angle. And as a result, I have this thingy which is called zenithal highlighting, zenithal pre-shading, but I go pretty heavy on the white because I want it to be brighter than you would typically have for zenithal highlighting. But at the same time, the areas which are deeper, like the back and the inside of the wings, I want them to remain significantly darker. Let's overbrush on the first one. Now let's do some overbrush on the second one. The skulls are not part of the miniature. I just added some from the various bits that I've accumulated. I generally like to add a couple of skulls to the base. They somehow make the miniature look, make the miniature appear a tad more evil. And that's the kind of impression I wanted to leave, especially when it's a never-born model. Now this quick dry brush is focused around, especially around the areas which I want, where I want the details to really pop. So the face is one of such areas. So there we have it. Very quick prep on those. So 20 minutes and hardly any progress made, but well, I've done an overview of new models, so that's something. Now I think I will start with the clothes, and that will be deceptively easy, because I will just use one color to begin with, which is called Templar White, and it's express color, and it gives this nice finish that looks pretty pale, and I want to try to somehow replicate the artwork, and in the output they are light gray, so definitely cold colors. So apologies for the noise, but I will use my vortex shaper now. So that's one color that you really want to shake well, because the thing is that those super bright contrast express colors, the pigment tends to accumulate at the bottom, so you want to shake it until you see getting released from the bottom, because if it's stuck to the bottom, then the paint won't have the kind of covering properties that they should be having. Take your medicine. Take your medicine. Yeah. I think they don't scream. They are just super chill. They are like, this is what the doctor prescribed. Remain calm. This is fine. So they are not screaming, take your medicine. They are just gently saying, this is fine. It will make you feel better. This is fine. All right, time for first color, and I think I will just get one of my bases for that. It's a 40mm unused base, and I will just apply it. It's kind of grayish. Yeah, like those silent evil entities. And I will just apply it directly onto the miniature. And this already creates some nice grayish effect. Flows very well into the recessed areas. They just have a one piece of clothing, which is like this ornamental dress. So that's not going to be super complex to paint, but I want to make sure that the darker areas remain much darker. So we'll go back and use some darker shade on top of that, probably non oil. And I'm doing that before I paint the skin, because this is the brightest color on the miniature, and I don't want it contaminated with anything else. I mean, the skin tone will also be pale, but this one should be more white than gray, at least in the most raised areas. That's how I envision it. And the nice thing about contrast of speed paints is that you get more solid color with more applications of the same paint. So this one doesn't cover that extremely well because the kind of chalky effect of the pre-shading is still visible, but that will gradually start disappearing as I continue applying more colors. And they have hooves, so they are clearly, well, humanoid, but more Nephilim than human. And in game, I don't think you ever field Castor without at least one Urnbearer, because they help so much with the unpack. I mean, this is one of those cards which is so packed with text on the front that it can actually get a bit confusing when you read it for the first time. But the thing is that the key thing to remember is that they get shielded on themselves very fast. You want at least 4 shielded on them before they activate. So typically you would activate Athorak really fast to put the no action barrier. You shall not target anything through those markers. Then you activate a cover Nephilim. It overheals, then it moves closer to them, heals, so overheals again, moves, and they have shielded 4 before you even start your unpack. So they're like this, but well, passively because your models do move faster up the board. And the cool thing is once you have 4 shielded, when they activate, they again allow another friendly model to move 2 inches forwards. So that takes 1 shielded off of them. And later on, they sorry for the noise. Later on, they remove 3 shielded and put focus on a friendly model, on a friendly returned model. So ideally on Castor. So Castor, it's always great when you have chance to put conditions like focused on a friendly model without using that model's actions. And even more efficient when you can do it on a major beater in your crew like Castor. So the clothes are more base coated than they were, and the skin on these creatures will be very pale, and the skin on these guy will be more pinkish, a little bit more pinkish, just to make sure that they are different beings. Actually, let me just have a quick look at the artwork if it's visible at all. No, we can't really tell by the artwork because only the Urnbearers are visible in it, but that's okay. Now, while it's drying, I can already start applying null oil, and I will grab a fine brush with finer tip because I want to be more careful about this application and really focus on those elements which are more recessed. So I'll just make sure that I have dark grayish color. That's the one I want. And I will just, even while it's drying, I will already start applying it into the recessed areas because as a result, what happens is as the light gray and the darker shade dry simultaneously, the paint kind of levels itself and creates this nice shade. I will then repeat the highlights on them just to make sure that there is smooth transition from darkest shades to brightest. And I will use pure white for final highlights. And I do it because, I've been spent a lot of time doing research and looking at different pictures of clothes. Even you can just put something in a well-lit area, put any piece of clothing and just observe how light reflects off of it and how the darkest elements are just pure black essentially, and the brightest can be like pure white. And when the previous layer is not fully dry, just makes it easier to move the brush along. And I will also kind of redefine this nice little ornament in the center. Wasn't really aware that they have some kind of jewelry, but makes them look more interesting. They're like those evil priests or some kind of shaman. Whatever they are really, really nice miniatures. And again, getting dark shade into the recessed areas, really focusing on letting it into all the crevices and keeping the raised areas brighter. Okay, maybe a little bit more on this one. And as it dries now, I will move on to working on the skin. I think that's enough. Actually, before I move to working on the skin, I can already start applying some highlights. So I will use off-white, put it on the same mini palette. So again, put it next to this gray, which I used for first glaze. Well, more of wash than glaze. Thin it down slightly. And then I have the super light gray that I will use to create some very light highlights. And I'm not waiting for the paint to completely dry, because then it kind of levels itself and the transitions between darker and brighter colors are just naturally smoother. So it might seem like counterintuitive solution, but trust me, it makes sense to put the paint on another color before the previous has solidly dried up. And the whole thing, there will be some blood, so even the material, which looks super neat and smooth and nice and white now, or light gray, I think there's some blood splatters will land on it once I start applying the blood effect on the substance flowing out of the urn. Just making sure I hold it the right spot. And the paint is thinned down, and I'm just trying to avoid the recessed areas, focusing on the raised area and just lightly touching it up with brighter color than the one that's in the recessed areas. And that creates this gradient-like transition from darker shades to brighter ones. And I agree that these characters look like they are up to some mean business for sure. So I've tried fielding too, and while it's great to have Castor with free focus +2 before he activates, the challenge I found is that once they give the focus, the crew is up ahead and they kind of stay behind, and it's hard to find specific use for them in the later turns of the game. So what happened, I had a very busy front with loaded with focus, and the back of my crew, so the Gwill and the Urnbearers were just chilling in the back, not really knowing what to do with themselves. They have some potential, some offensive potential. If you position miniature a model with black blood next to opponent's model, they can ping for 1 damage twice, which can be surprisingly good. I mean, I've killed one master like that, carries in one friendly game, and I know that this can work, but it's rather situational. Cannot really plan for them to be doing any spectacular things on the offensive end. They're more of a support model, and their impact is particularly important in the unpack phase. After that, they just stay there. And if you can, they can lure, so that's a good thing. They can lure your own models back, heal them up. So that's one way of using them beyond turn 1. And I keep on highlighting the white clothes. I don't want them to be pure white. I want them to be like an off-white, dirty, grayish shade of white. And at this point, I'm really trying not to cover too much surface, just to make sure that it's not painting over the same surface, but just painting the most raised areas, the most raised elements. And that creates this transition, and it's very easy to overdo it and cover the previously highlighted areas. So I really encourage you to take your time when you approach painting in a similar fashion, and just be prepared to spend some extra time on gradually adding brighter shades to the more raised areas. So there is the white. And later on I may still apply one quick glaze on top of that. But before I do it, I'll still let some of the darker shade into the recessed areas. Just grabbing a finer brush for that. And really focused on the deepest, on the most recessed areas, deepest shades. And that way I ensure that the depth is there. I think the wings, when I start working on them, initially I thought that they would be black, but now I see that black will be used on the hair. So now I'm leaning towards very, very dark purple. Like this deep, saturated shade of purple. But that depends on how other elements look as I go along, as I continue. Maybe a little bit more highlight on the front and some of the raised areas here. And now I can move to painting the skin. And for the skin, I will go with Calimont Flash, but I will thin it down slightly. And I will apply it without thinning it down onto the humans. Well, I would assume that those are humans. And then I will apply it thin down to the ladies, to the Urnbearers, so that you'll be able to tell the difference and the degree of saturation that comes with it. And Calimont Flash, it's one of my favorite contrast paints because it's one of those few that immediately give you a really, really decent result. Essentially, you just apply it and it looks good. Not great, but it immediately looks good. And that's, in essence, what you want out of contrast paints. Good effect achieved quickly. Painting over the hair, but that doesn't really matter at this point. It will all be quite messy once I've started applying the blood effects. Just making sure I cover the whole back and don't leave any elements pure white. There are streaks of this blood or black blood or whatever it is, which are sculpted onto the miniature. The same thing on the other guy. And on this guy, it looks like this substance that is being poured onto him kind of defies gravity because it doesn't flow naturally downwards. It spirals up out of the body, so clearly some kind of blood magic happening. And the face. And then I will apply the same color, but slightly thin down, and maybe I will even add a touch of purple already, so that it becomes saturated differently before I apply it to the Urnbearers. Just want to make sure that everything is covered, that no elements are left with just the base coat. And then I can move to the Urnbearers and maybe paint their skin now. So for that, I will just thin it down slightly. Maybe even add a light touch of purple and cardboard crimson. Just a drop of it. Doesn't look like much at this point, but it's just the first hour of the stream. I want it thinned down, and then I'm ready to apply it. So there's the application, and the skin tone is quite different than the one that the victim on the base has. And the urns, I think that in the artwork they are some kind of bright metal, so I'll likely stick to that. I'm not painting the face because it's a mask. That's why I'm leaving it just with the base coat. Yeah, cardboard crimson. That's the one. That's the one. I use it because where do I place it? I have it in a different container, but it has this nice shade which is not fully purple. It's slightly brownish, but I mix it with Galliman flesh and add a little of water just to thin it down because I want the skin to be really pale on the Urnbearers. This is just the base coat, right? So that will be still highlighted to some kind of creamy light color, maybe even pure white on the most raised areas. And those miniatures were pretty easy to assemble, pretty straightforward. Didn't really need instructions for them. And Word was kind enough to send them to me. And they are getting released this month. And if you plan to add them to your Neverborn crew, they should be available anytime now. I think it's this point where you can already start either ordering them directly or pre-ordering them. Now that the paint starts drying, I'm applying second layer, but this time focusing on more on the recessed areas, so just to make sure that the muscles are visible, putting some more on the hand so that fingers stand out more. And I can still saturate a little bit more these guys. And the same thing, applying the color to the recessed areas. So just in a way enhancing the details on them. So still early. Very little progress on this ones, but I'm not in a hurry, that's for sure. Now I reckon I can maybe base coat the... Actually, no, I think I missed some spots, so I will redo them now. And the spots that I missed are the necks, obviously. Because that is... Now I looked at the box art and had a reflection that, yeah, I need to add some color here. And on the neck here as well. And I can still bring back the brightest highlights there later on, so that's not the biggie. Now for the urns and the masks, I will use Psycho Brown, which is a very, very dark shade of brown. Dark shade of contrast, because the mask will be like bright gold. So dark brown base coat should work just fine on them. Just don't want to paint the horns. And the same on the other guy, on the other lady. It's a kind of ritualistic mask. And now the urns. So making sure that I do not paint over other elements, which becomes a bit tricky, especially when I want to try to show you guys every brush stroke that's happening. Just trying to avoid the hands, and I think the best way is just to start by painting around those elements which you don't want to be brown. So first of all, make sure that you paint around the hands and around the areas where this urn touches the material or any other piece of the miniature. And that way you can then just focus on covering the remaining surface, which makes it a little bit easier. Not easy, but a little bit easier. It's also super hot in Poland currently, so that's never very helpful when you want to paint miniatures, because the paints dry a little bit faster. We've been experiencing a heat wave, which, well, is great because you want sun and hot weather in the summer, but at the same time it's a bit scary because it clearly shows that the climate is changing and not in the way it should. I mean, not at the pace at which it should, for sure. So that's one urn. Now time to paint the other urn. And again, I'm starting with painting around the arm and hand, just to make sure I clearly separate these two areas. And then I think I will base coat the wings then. I may start with just purple and then gradually move to black. And she also has some bracelet on her right forearm, so I will also base coat them with dark brown because I want them to be golden. Being very careful now about painting the part of the bracelet that's closer to the white clothes. And again, not really able to show precisely what I'm doing. I'm just painting the part of the urn that's closer to the body, which is a bit of a challenge because the way that miniature is assembled, but that's okay now. Okay, so that's where we are at this stage. In time for some more work on the skin now, because it's becoming clear now where I need to place the highlights. I also left a spot of brown, which I didn't want here, but I can quickly remove it and fix it at this point. Still possible, and that's the advantage of going from brighter to darker colors and working with acrylic paints in general, is that they are a bit more forgiving and you can at times make some quick adjustments before the paint even dries. Painting in between the fingers. And actually, the part which I think I can paint over as well is partly visible leg with hooves. So clearly this part shows that it's not a human being, but some kind of demon. Now I think I'll do the black hair and base coat the horns and at the same time the skulls, and gradually move slowly towards this face where I will be filling it in with more color. But that's just the first hour of the stream, so plenty of time to go. So for now, the core elements are base coated, which is a good starting point. think I will do the horns now. So for the horns, I will use skeleton horde because it's good and bright color. I will use also this color on the spikes on the wings. Maybe I'll start with them and the skulls on the base as well. And I will just apply directly from the pot. Yeah, slow progress, but there is this stage where it moves from being just the base colors to those more detailed and clearly highlighted elements, and I'm not there yet, but 2 hours to go. So that's, I think that what I'm aiming for is to have everything with solidly base coated colors during the first half of the stream, and then spend potentially the second half of the stream on working on highlights and re-establishing the darker areas as well. And the horns. But thank you. Glad you see that I'm making some progress here. I honestly don't think I will ever field 2 in a game, but never say never. There might be in the future a different strategy or scheme that makes it a reasonable choice to put more minions on the table. They're also good candidates for Ancient Pact because while they die easy, it, they die to a stiff breeze, you could say. Well, maybe not a stiff breeze, but to light wind. But they tend to stay in the back line, and getting to them is not that obvious because you need to go through some other more resilient, bigger models in order to get to them. So unless you misposition them, they should be pretty safe in the back, waiting for a chance to potentially lure other models back and heal them up before they can jump back into the action. And yeah, it is kind of demotivating when the opponent has put a lot of effort into putting some serious damage on Castor. He gets lured back, healed for 4, with added focus, with some shielded, potentially can get back into action. So I think Castor is all about finding that sweet spot of balance at when do you commit to keeping him out away from the crew and really pestering the opponent, and when do you want him back. Yes, the same with Black Blood Shaman, that's true. But then, you never know. Things may change, they may get errata. You never know if the miniature stays the same for a long time. And prior to the errata, I would I would take one Black Blood Shaman into Titania crew and to Euripides crew, because giving one focus to several models at the same time is it's just great, and unfortunately it's no longer possible. So now I'm just using this opportunity. Since I worked on those bone elements, I'm already adding base coat to the skulls on the base, and later on I will make sure that the color of bone is different on the skulls than it is on the horns. I played Nekima only once in this edition. That was before the errata. I really enjoyed it. played against Nekimatu once and was quite amazed with the production line, with how her thoughts quickly evolved into larger, meaner models. Alright, so now I will work on the wings. Maybe before I do the wings, I will base coat the hair. I'll use green black from Speed Paint range. Oh yeah, she can get in the face, but she, of course, she's a killer and she can bring a model down. But what I like about Castor is the blasts. So the blasts can be quite impactful if you aren't prepared, if you don't have models with extended reach, if you are able to attack a few models at the same time, then you can really cause some heavy damage and kill more than one model in a single activation. And with Nekima, it's rather more focused on a single target with heavier damage output for that single model, clearly. It's just a slightly different approach. So I'm just base coating the hair black now, making sure I do it from all sides evenly. Have you tried Nekimatu, the brood mother? So I faced her once, and spread them out was one of the strategies in the pool. And honestly, I don't think you can stop her unless you really alpha her. That's incredibly hard to stop her from her crew from scoring this particular strategy, because she has, after turn 1 and after turn 2, she has more and more highly mobile minions that can just quickly move and keep on adding those markers. Okay, a decent blast. And yeah, and a cool model as well, which is always an advantage. Okay, so this is her here. So now I need to be super careful about making sure I paint just the hair, not the clothes. Yeah. And she has amazing card draw. You can draw so many cards in a turn, which again is not something that Neverborn tend to excel at. Refilling your hand. Yeah, Dreamer is one of the masters I plan to spend some time with at some point. Just haven't been successful with him. But then I played maybe 2 or 3 games with him in this edition, and I haven't even tried Dreamer 2. Though people seem to be enjoying him quite a lot. I have all the miniatures I need to play the whole keyword, but I just enjoy playing Castor currently. I mean, I've been playing Castor using proxy models, so now I'll need to really paint quite a few miniatures over the next couple of weeks, although it will be a bit more challenging since I'm going on my vacation next week. I plan to take some miniatures with me just to assemble them, but don't plan to do any painting over the next 2 weeks. Okay. So now the wings, I think, or maybe the base, maybe the gray on the base, and then the wings. And that will give me solid base color for pretty much everything. So for the base, I will use Basilic Cannon Gray and just apply it directly. Maybe use a slightly larger brush. This one that can hold a bit more of the paint, and I will just apply it to the base. It's a pretty good color because it's definitely more towards gray than black. So works well with pre-shaded surface. And the same thing over the whole thing. So around the base, not really being very careful here, as I will add some dry brush, maybe a few glazes, just to keep the color a bit more interesting. I've sculpted those bases from Milliput. Nothing really fancy, just wanted them to stand a bit taller and look a bit more demonic with all that skulls on the base. All right, we have 8 people now live following the stream, so thanks to all who have joined or who are just taking a peek. To those of you who have just joined, today I'm painting a newly released pair of Urnbearers. So they are hitting the stores this month, and they are quite essential for Castor and his crew. And it's crazy that some of the crews, like Damien especially, have been around since Gen Con, so they've been around for almost a year. This one just got released. So I expect to see more Castor crews hitting the tournament stage in the near future, hopefully. Hello, hello. Hey, welcome, Raid. Thanks for dropping by. So this is a painting stream. I'm painting the Urnbearer model from the Hashed Scopes box. So this lovely lady here, actually 2 versions of her. Well, 2 versions of the same model. So one standing and the other crouching. And more or less halfway through the painting process on this one. Still plenty to go. I mean, most of the base colors are up there, but I will still do plenty of touch-ups, both in terms of adding more highlights and reinforcing the shaded areas. Now, Time to paint some gray on the other base as well. So I'll be curious to see if anyone following the stream right now is also painting something, because I find that when I watch other word painters and I paint while they are painting, it seems to work quite well. Feels like there is some kind of connection with the person doing the live painting on the stream. Base coating today. All right, what were you base coating? Malifaux or some other miniatures? Now I need to get into those recessed areas between the victim of the ritual and the model of the Urnbearer, trying not to put gray on the clothes. Monsters from Massive Darkness. Cool. It's nice. I mean, I like base coating part. I mean, I like every single part of this hobby, but I like to do base coating in batches. So typically I have several miniatures that I base coat at the same time. And then it's depends on what I'm after, but either a batch painting approach or just take it turn by turn. Load task. Cool. So the neon yellow, it's special splash gel effect that I applied at the beginning of the stream just to show how you can quickly create speckles of blood or flame effects. I've done it on Carrie's crew I painted a while ago, where I sculpted some easy and good looking flames with it on the base. And this works as well because I thought here that since I added this extra height to the base, I wanted to make it look like blood was flowing downwards, and I needed to add some more texture to the model. Just making sure I cover everything that's still white with color, and move on to the next part. Now the wings. The wings will be kind of like a frame to this miniature. I think I might do them actually with heavy purple, and then gradually keep them darker and darker. But you get to start somewhere. So I'll start with purple. That's the one I want. So deep purple. So that rumble you just heard in the background is the vortex shaker. A really handy device to have for making sure that your paints are mixed well before you start applying them. And again, I will grab a larger brush, slightly mix it with a quick touch of black, and paint beginning with the back where I won't stain anything with purple, and I'm just pretty free to go heavy. And then I will gradually keep it darker and darker with darker coats of heavier shade of purple. looks super glossy now. That will lose the gloss, it will become more matte as I continue, as it dries. I need to switch to smaller brush now. And as the paint dries, what I do is I grab another brush. Maybe this one will be good for that purpose. And what I want to do is I want to drag it out of those areas where it pulled too much. Because if there is too much of it in one place, then it doesn't dry well, it doesn't dry evenly, and causes much heavier shade than I would want to have. And the paint's dry in a funny way today because it's super hot and not really humid. Some stains on the clothes, but they can be quickly removed with a clean brush. And that's what you get when you assemble the miniature first. And you need to paint into some of the really, really tough to get into elements. That's fine. I can work with it. Just need to be a bit more careful not to keep the paint on other elements where I don't want it to stay. And that purple will be gradually becoming darker and darker with more of the darker shade applied. Okay, approaching the half of the stream. Seems possible that I will finish everything tonight, but then I won't be really forcing it. Well, it's actually going to be my one and only stream this month, because later in the month I'm taking a quick break and going on a couple of weeks of vacation with the family. Going to enjoy the seaside for a couple of weeks. That's typically where I spend my holidays. Just a better climate. Also really enjoy the feel of sand on bare feet when you walk across the beach, and it's very soothing and relaxing and generally refreshing to travel there. Unfortunately not cheap, but then holidays are not cheap anywhere. Here I'm just pushing back some of the purple from the clothes. And onto the wings again. So this miniature is pretty much base coated on all fronts. So all the elements have a base color of some sort. Now it's just a matter of, well, fine tuning, which will be taking place over the next 90 minutes here. And it is a slower process than applying just the base coat, but an enjoyable process nonetheless. So that's the base color on the whole miniature. I didn't paint any blood effect yet. I will just leave it for the final stage. So I don't need to really do it now. And on to the other lady now, the kneeling one. And again, I will start with those elements which are closer to the body, because those are harder to get to, and it's easier to make a mistake. Here, by mistake, I mean paint over something that's supposed to be brighter. So it's at this point, after the mini has been assembled, I'm find myself a bit struggling to get into all those recessed areas, but then I avoid painting in. Thank you that you like it. Really appreciate the comment. I generally avoid painting miniature in parts, so in using sub assembly, because it doesn't help me with gauging where I am with overall composition of colors, how they interact with one another. I just want to paint the whole thing. And as a result, I put myself in more challenging situations like today, where I need to get to areas which are not easily accessible. And it's easy to leave some color that you don't want on elements that you painted previously. So that's why it's always good to have a second brush, maybe with thicker bristle, handy, and just remove the color that you don't want from the area which you want to remain gray or white. And that's what I'm doing right now, because I've made it harder for myself, but I'm just too stuck in my ways to change my approach. I want to paint the whole thing, don't want to paint any bits separately. Back to the kneeling lady. Maybe some fresh paint will help. And paints dry much faster today, which isn't extremely helpful, but nothing I can't overcome. And again, I'm painting the areas around those spikes, because that way I kind of secure them, lock them in, surrounded with darker color. So that's the right wing is almost complete. Just want to make sure I go over it from all sides, and at the same time make sure that there is nothing left unpainted on the left one. And trying to keep the coverage roughly even, because if it's uneven then it will dry, causing it to look bad in a nutshell. Yeah, I've painted all the areas which were harder to get to, so I can switch to a slightly larger brush now and just go a bit heavier, faster with the application. Just going around the whole miniature, and I noticed that there are some bubbles, some paint pooling in a few areas, so I will switch to a different brush now and make sure I remove the excess of paint or the bubbles that formed in the process of application, and that they do not stay there, because if you allow them to dry, then pretty much they can ruin a good paint job. So I just use a brush to kind of move them around to area where I can take them off of the miniature. Again, some paint pooled here and here. And that's the second one, base coated. Again, not putting any blood effects right now. But already looking pretty solid. I may still move the paint from some areas where it stayed. And now, for my next trick, I will start working on the skin. So for the skin tone, I will first of all use Antia Skin, which is this mid-tone. I will thin it down and apply it to the human victim. And I thin it down because that way the shaded areas will still be preserved, and I will already start filtering it towards much brighter color that I ultimately want to be visible. And the same on the other guy. And again, the main advantage of using Vallejo color paints from the new range is that these paints just work so well with one another. And now I'm just applying thinned down base coat on the skin, which goes directly onto the parts which were just tackled with contrast paint, and it already makes for some more subtle highlights on the skin, which is really great because painting skin can be tricky, painting human skin especially. So again, applying it and focusing on gradually moving towards the raised areas, making sure that I preserve this human skin tone look while the wings are drying. And when the wings dry completely, I will be able to apply more darker glazes on them. It's also a bit more challenging to paint highlights on a miniature that's positioned at an unusual angle, because you rarely paint faces from this perspective like the one that we have here. And while it's drying, I can still reapply it to some areas which did not receive enough of purple shade. And I can start adding in brighter shades. So now I will add rosy flesh, mix it in with the base coat, well, I mean with the darker shade of skin tone that have been applied already. And I will, very shortly, I will do one more overbrush here, just to bring things together. Now I need a brighter skin tone, and I have it. There we go. Making sure I apply it thin down. And just painting on the raised areas. The miniature is really, really well sculpted, so it helps guide the brush strokes quite comfortably. Now I do not need to be that meticulous here, because a large part of this model will be just covered with blood from this blood effect. But still, it doesn't mean that the surface beneath it has to be just with one color. Depending on how it turns out, I can choose to leave some of the human skin tone visible. And while I work around those human models, I just try to make sure that some of the previous layer of skin tone is visible in the recessed areas, and that allows me to create a good transition. Especially on those well-defined featured like muscles on the stomach, like their abs, the forearm, the bicep. Those are elements which really benefit from careful application of highlights. And I'm just again reapplying lighter color and observing how the transition is progressing. Transition from those darker colors to brighter ones. And one more highlight. This time it's pale flesh. And again, I'm mixing it with the previous color. So not applying it directly, and really important to thin it down, especially when it's so hot and the paints dry faster. But also, I mean, I sound like a broken record, but it's always, maybe not always, but most of the time it's way better to apply 2 or 3 thin coats versus one thicker, and just gradually build this transition from darker towards brighter. The same on the second one or the first one, depending how you look at them. So now I'm just trying to focus on a small section of the muscles. Making sure that the forehead, cheekbones, that those elements are clearly visible and well defined. And now moving directly to pale flesh, but switching to slightly smaller brush. And this time the highlights will be the final touches. A tiny drop on the cheekbone. Very light touch up on the forehead. Tiny dot on the other cheekbone, dot on the ear. It's easy to overdo it, and as a result get some very pale skin tone on everything, which doesn't look great. So really, it's all about taking your time to go through those highlights and not rush. So I think I'm overall painting at a slightly slower pace than I normally do, but also I need to stress the fact that the beginning of the stream, like first 10-15 minutes, I believe, was spent on unboxing and showing the contents of all the boxes with the returned models. Some pretty cool stuff there. My first take is that Castor Awakened is the best looking model, but that may change once I have assembled them. And at this point I can already start adding some very light highlights to the skin tone on them as well, on the Urnbearers. Because I want the skin to be super pale. Now to get a brush with finer tip, or one of mine tiny ones, and paint the fingers. Hey, defective dice. Nice seeing you here. So it's the season of the return, and I have the pleasure of painting two miniatures from the Hashed Copes box. Not corpse, but copes. I initially thought it's corpse. So moving slowly towards the final stage of this session. And I started with showcasing the contents of all the other returned miniatures. So if anyone feels like they would like to take a peek at the spruce with any of the unboxed, with any of the returned models, then just let me know in the chat. Yes, this is the real defective dice. This is the Malifaux lore expert, and you can pick his brains because he knows everything about the lore behind the models which are painted in any stream. So the myth, the legend, we are graced by his presence here. Definitely one of my favorite content creators. The Mr. Dice. Yep, that's the right title. That's the titled version of Defective Dice. I'm going to even add now off-white to this pale skin tone to make it even brighter. So the paint flows differently today. Clearly I am definitely experiencing the impact of hot weather. Oh, so have we all, I think. Anyone who's into Malifaux and wants to get some interesting insights on the lore sooner or later ends up watching those videos. Though I don't think the Malifaux masters were covered in them, or correct me if I'm wrong. Or maybe not all of them at least. I don't recall a lore video about Castor. But then there isn't that much lore about him. I think there was a video in which you made a prediction and you guessed successfully that Castor would be the new master. But then imposter dice. No, you're the real one. We know better. So some more dramatic highlights on the human victims. Anya and Nexus don't really have much lore. Prima does have an episode for everyone else. All right. So what I will do now is I will do a quick overbrush since I have white. Well, I will have white on my palette. And time for another overbrush. This time focusing on the base. Very true. And straight away this gives nice depth to everything that's been covered on the base so far, because it was kind of muted dark, and this gives some much needed depth to it straight away. And I will repaint the skulls in a second. Maybe quick highlight, quick overbrush on the horns as well. I will stain them with some yellow, just to, or maybe some brown. But for now, I really like the texture. And again, dry brush on the base here, just to bring up the level of detail. And this fluorescent yellow will disappear from the base later on as I start applying the blood effects. Keep on talking about blood, but those miniatures, the blood will be the focal point. That's why I have the pale colors. That's why I have the purple, the light grays, because that will all come together nicely with this fountain of blood in the center as the main focal point. Yeah, we are looking forward to the new book. I mean, I hope there is a new book. I would assume there is a new book. And I know that one person in the chat knows, and obviously cannot share it, but I think it's a good guess that a new book is coming, because that's what we've been receiving each year from Word, so don't see why it should be any different this year. And time flies by too fast. Feels like 2023 has just started and we are already more than halfway through. It's just too fast, or I'm just getting too old. Now the wings. The wings are still purple, and I want them more towards this shade that I have on the box art. Lucius sent you to DC. That's a good one. So I think for that one I will get. Let me grab the right color. Shinish purple will be the one. I'll just put it on my mini palette. Maybe thin it down slightly with some of the medium, and start applying it. Because I can always keep it slightly brighter or darker, depending on where I want to go. No worries. Malifaux is full of deceptions everywhere. So that's a really, really heavy purple that I will be applying now. I think I'll start with the kneeling one. I'm going full heavy purple here. And again, starting on the back, where this won't have that much of an impact because I can't really put purple anything else here. And this is looking much, much better now. I want dark, dark purple on the wings. Of course, there will be some highlights as well, but for now, it's all about keeping them dark, darkening them, and allowing the paint to dry before I keep them even darker. Looks super glossy now, but I think that it's getting much towards the dark range now. Story of Madness was what I was thinking about. Yep. Oops. Almost spilled a pot of Shaish purple. That would be a complete disaster. Although once I spilled a pot of darkest brown contrast paint I have, and some cleanup needed to be done. As long as you're fast, you can fix a lot. Those are acrylic paints after all, so they can come off if you really want to clean the surface. Although the worst thing is if you spill some of the paint on fabric, then it's no longer reversible. It becomes stained, and nothing you can do about it. Hey, thank you. Glad you like it. Building now this kind of dark frame around the pale bright center. So there will be dark purple wings, bright pale clothes and skin tone, and a lot of blood effect. That's the plan for the next hour, for the remaining hour of the stream, which seems doable. But thanks for dropping by, and glad you like what you're seeing. Of course, I will share pictures once it's ready, but I generally take pictures in daylight, as it's really difficult to have the perfect setup for artificial light. Yeah, everyone, it's a rite of passage. And of course, you need to absorb enough paint from the brush directly into your mouth and contaminate your organism and your immune system, with enough of the pigment to fully call yourself a fully fledged painter. That's another thing. And drink paint water, right? Everyone has to drink paint water every now and then, or at least once. That's why my paint, my glass with dirty paint water is just completely different, so I don't mistakenly drink out of it. Yeah, that was the idea, but I on purpose I applied the brighter purple first, because that allows me to control better the process and the application of darker purple. Now I will do a wash on the skin. I'll do it with Carboard Crimson, mixed in with a little bit of water. Or maybe more than a little bit, like twice the amount of water to what I have in a wash, so that it's lightly purple, barely purple. And I will apply it to the skin tone, so that this is glaze. That's why it's like filtering. It doesn't have immediate effect like contrast paints, but it kind of gives it a nice saturation of slightly purple undertone, and that goes well with the overall composition here. So it's filtered more towards the purple scope, because the wings are so dark, and there would be pointless contrast with completely different color. And now it's starting to gradually come together. I think time for to paint the mask. That's maybe before the mask I will do the horns, and I may still keep the wings even darker. Well, I will see. For now, I will allow them to dry, and add a touch of yellow to the horns. Again, thin down yellow glaze and paint more of it towards the center. So the horns are just dry brushed right now, but they will be gradually stained with darker and darker shade of brown as I continue working on them. I will not add any yellow to the skulls, they will be just done with browns. And I can do the same on those spikes coming out of the wings. Because, you know, yellow works pretty well with purple. Just think about Los Angeles Lakers or Milwaukee Bucks and their uniforms. Those colors are not there by mistake. Now a bit of purple. Not purple, browns. Time to apply some mid browns and soft browns. And for that I will switch to washes, and I will first apply mid brown on the horns while the yellow is still drying, because then it will allow it to blend together better. So I want the yellow visible, but I also want brown to be distinguishable in more center area of each horn, and the tips also, and the same on those spikes. And again, applying it before the yellow is fully dry allows paints to level themselves and create the slightly smoother highlight than you would have if you waited for it to dry completely. And now for the skulls. Soft down, thin down, and the skulls can be painted now. I will also put a few highlights on them as well. But for now, I just want to make sure that they look, that they have more of a smooth look versus the dramatic change that occurred after I applied brutal dry brush on them. And I can slightly tweak the look of those skulls with different brown glaze, focusing more on the areas which are slightly more recessed. So defective dice, if you're still here, what is your hunch? What is your, let's say, educated guess? Are we going to see more masters or more focus on rather enforcers, minions, henchmen to kind of fill in what each faction might be missing? Because with masters, I think the masters are a bit tricky to introduce to the system now, because you need two versions of each master, and that takes a lot of testing, fine-tuning, and I just don't know if Word has had enough time to prepare for that. I mean, the more the merrier, but at some point you just have to consider what is more visible. So now I'm applying a glaze on the clothes, which is like essentially like dirty brown water, just to slightly filter what I have in place. So this is the part of the process where things start coming together really. I will again repeat some of the highlights on the clothes with pure white or off-white. I think off-white will be preferable. And what is missing for sure is the metallic on the face, but that will come very soon. I think now I can do some highlights on the hair using dark gray. And I don't need to hurry, still 1 hour to go, which is plenty of time. So what I'm going to do now while painting the hair, I will, instead of dry brushing, I will just add thin vertical lines wherever I can reach with the brush. Yes, I just don't have access to do the dry brush. And dry brush is fine for doing the hair, although it's hard to keep transition from darker shade to brighter if you rely only on dry brush. I think we'll get a light year of releases this year because they have been on absolute terror for the last 3 years. New factions and titles and Ninth Masters. And it's been a lot, so they probably need to breathe. And because this year is the other side getting 2 new factions that will probably take up some of the time and attention. Makes a lot of sense. That's makes sense. So if they are to release new minions or enforcers, then obviously there are a number of keywords in the system in each faction already. So my guess would be to, well, the thinking might be to just add cross keyword minions or enforcers, because otherwise if we are to receive minion for each keyword, then it's dozens of new models. And I don't know if Grid just has the capacity to test that many models for this wave of releases. But we'll find out soon enough. We've already seen the Nightmare Crew, which just looks ridiculously good. I mean, it's just incredible. I'm so glad I don't play Yenza, because I would need to buy it. If I was Explorers player, I would definitely be ordering this box. Because the thing is that there are so many weird looking models in Yenza's keyword, like the Damned or those walking bushes, however they are called, the Kurgan, and they don't, seems like they wouldn't feel so much out of place standing next to these. Maybe slightly lighter touch for final highlight here. On the hair, so just using off-white with a slight touch of purple to a slight touch of gray to have this very light gray color, and just put it on just in the middle of each of the hair strand. Actually, those miniatures are super nice, but really hard to paint some of the areas once everything has been assembled. The quality of the models has been getting better and better. There's the boxes. Yeah, the nightmare boxes are amazing. So those are the alternative models that appear every year. Alternative master alongside the minions. And in terms of new models, I just previewed. I mean, I opened all the returned keyword models and boxes at the beginning of the stream, and this is the one that I think I'm mostly looking forward to assembling because it looks like a highly complex 3D puzzle. But just look at the texture on the tip of this ball here. It's just incredible how detailed it is. All right, I guess it's time to. No, before I put highlights on the mask, I will still do some other elements. So maybe a quick touch up on the horns. I mean, I'm saying quick. What I mean is just slight adjustment, nothing major. And here as well, the new Scaffold Master, some of the best work. Absolutely. So last year I had the chance to paint the dismounted version of Lord Galeholt, so the alternative Hoffman, and it was just ridiculously good. Just ridiculous how good they get. I think while I have the off-white, I will also retouch some of the bits of cloth which absorbed a little bit of purple, which is not something that I had in mind. I mean, there hasn't been a nightmare crew that didn't look awesome. It's not that nothing that I can think of. Nothing that I can think of. Though they, well, just looking at previous year and this year, it seems like dark fantasy is this alternative artistic realm that we're just exploring, versus this fun, ridiculous, like those Ulix miniatures that were like unicorns and pixies and all that jazz. Okay, this one will be bright because there will be blood here. So again, just some touch-ups on the robes. Maybe a little bit on the skin as well. Oh yeah, iconic too. I had the pleasure of painting two miniatures from that range, Sonia and Titania, and I now use only Titania, the small game-sized version for my Neverborn games whenever I feel Titania, either version. So it just became my favorite Titania sculpt, and it's some really hard competition because all Titania models look incredibly good. Even though I'm not the biggest fan of this alternative Titania that's like this card, like this red Joker, classic red Joker, so Titania emerging from like a pool of blood. So that's not my favorite, but apart from that, I like each version, each of the versions, but the iconic one, the game-sized iconic one, just beats them all. Yeah, they are amazing. They are absolutely incredible. And now for the eyes on the humans, I will just reinforce the shades around the eyes. And as for the new iconic ones, check out the, what's the name of the zombie, of the ice eating zombie? Ice cream eating zombie. That's the cool one. Because it was like a tongue-in-cheek zombie, and now they made this really, really dark version of Archie. Archie is the name. So this really dark, mean-looking Archie. Okay, so while it dries, I can still touch up the skulls a little bit. So again, thin down white, just focusing on the most raised areas. He's misunderstood. Yeah, Archie is. I mean, I have no intention of expanding my collection into resurrectionists, although now it's the gate is open with Castora and his keyword. But that Archie model is absolutely incredible. Just incredible. Now for the hair on this one, I think I'll go with brown. I'll go with Gorgranta fur. And the same on the other one. Because it's a quick and easy color that will work quite well here. Okay, so around 40 minutes to go, so plenty of time, and feeling quite confident now that I will be able to finish these two miniatures before the end of the stream. And my next stream will be in August. I'll take a bit of break after this one, enjoy some holidays, and there will be other streams in the meanwhile. Like next one is coming up same time I'm streaming today, but tomorrow. This will be Dag, also known as Guslado, and he will be painting Ontimel. So one of the new henchmen for the Bayou faction. Heavily inspired character, heavily inspired by Moby Dick. Arguably one of the best models in faction now. Oh yeah, the Young Frankenstein. Those are good. Those are really good, and the thing I really like about them is that they will look great next to other models from the faction. And you see, I missed a major spot here. This whole section should be purple, and it's not. Which means I need to fix it. And I thought I was in control. Let me just get a good angle to deal with it. Because I don't want to mess up my work too much by adding purple here. But at the same time, this purple needs to be strengthened. So I'll just grab a smaller brush. Black and white. Yeah, that could do it. That could be some cool classic horror look. But then zombies are just, there's so much potential when it comes to painting different skin tones on zombies, because literally you just can't go wrong. You cannot say that it looks unrealistic, too rotten. No, it's just always going to look good, regardless of how you paint it. Okay, time for what now? Maybe the mask, finally. Maybe the mask. I'll just put aside some of the paints which I don't currently use, and for the mask, I think I'll go with two metallic shades, obviously, at least two. So I need to give them a good shake. And speaking of cool models, I'm not painting this one today, but this is another of those lovely, creepy models by Word Games. The white eyes. Like its body is covered with ice, which isn't really visible at this point, but I will make it visible. It seems like a decent tech pick into crews that rely heavily on shielded condition. Now the masks. So I will start with metallic, this one, and just apply it directly onto the face. And I will highlight it with some brighter shade afterwards. Just want to make sure I don't paint over the details and leave them dark brown, so that there is some kind of transition from dark shade of brown to brighter. I mean dark shade of metallic, of brown metallic to maybe even silver. And you don't see that immediately because it seems like those are faces, but those are actually masks. You can see it clearly in the artwork. And for some reason, when I first saw them, I thought that I didn't just notice those masks. All right, now brighter shade of gold, and then this brighter shade of gold mixed with silver, and then the urns and the ornament on the waist. Well, actually, I will just paint the ornament on the waist first. Well, I need to hold it upside down to just be able to see it clearly, because otherwise it's just tricky to paint along those finely detailed pieces. This should be darker, so I need a separating line here. All right, fixed it. Now, some gold highlights. Maybe I'll switch to a finer brush for that. And some highlights on the mask. They will become more pronounced when I start applying gold mixed with silver. At least I think so. Okay, 30 minutes to go. I mean, I don't really need to speed it up, but just need to be conscious of the time left, that's all. So, some gold touch-ups towards the midsection here. And again, this will be saturated with some glazes. Now the silver, pure silver, to be mixed with gold for at least one more highlight on those faces. Is there a keyword that you play that you think needs some help in the way of new releases? I know a few keywords. Models like Syndicate. Yeah, for for Neverborn, I would like models with armor and ranged attacks, but that's not going to happen because that's just not what Neverborn do, and that would just not go well together with what they represent as a faction. Hard to say which in particular need adjustments or reinforcements. Syndicate doesn't have too many models, that's true. I would say maybe maybe some savage models on smaller bases than 40 millimeters would be neat to have. So a quick purple glaze on the golden mask just to bring it together tight well with the rest of the composition. Angel Isis on the buff list, yes, that's true. And I have high hopes for her to be a viable choice because, you know, having a ranged attack that ignores armor, because she's a henchman, so she can ensure the armor ignore part. Maybe having ways of adding focus on her before she activates would also be neat, like we have with the returned. So the white spots here will all be blood. But before blood, I still need to paint the urns and also this intricate ornament here. So Angel Eyes, yes, I'm very much looking forward to seeing what Word does with her. I've tried her once against Hoffman crew, but just she has some potential in the current state of things, but just doesn't have the ability to make any kind of major impact on the game. So I'm glad she's getting reworked. Yeah, there was, if you look at Word News, there was a note with models that would be tuned down and looked into for some improvements. And Angel List was clearly on the list. And some examples of how the fixes the models which are currently overtuned will be effectively put in place. Like I think Damien was given as an example. Right, now I think I'll do maybe some... No, the urn now. Time to paint the urn. So I will start with silver metallic this time. Just give it a good shake. Yeah, but you know, it's amazing that Word actually goes to considerable lengths to show that they hear what the gaming community is saying and explain their thought process. I mean, it's a lot. I don't know any other company that does it. And again, I'm not expert. I do not analyze all the other gaming systems, but it just seems to me quite rare if a company can stay that closely connected with a global, because let's face it, it's a global community. Maybe not the largest community in the world, but still a global and vast community. Large enough to provide some kind of data, statistical point of reference for how things work in practice. And these voices are heard and respected by Word, which is pretty incredible. Right now, sorry for holding at awkward angles, but I'm just trying to get a solid cover of dark silver on this one. Okay, final 30 minutes. So essentially what I still have left is the urn and the blood effect. So seemingly not much. So if I don't make any major mistakes and end up repainting things, should be able to finish this two lovely ladies. And you know, I'm actually playing a league game because we have a summer league in our local meta. So I will definitely have to put at least one of them on the table. I mean, I will put, let's face it, I won't put two. Just doesn't make that much sense to have them both in game. And the guy who runs the league, he's very creative with scenarios. He mixes up schemes from different gaming grounds and alternative scenarios. So those games are quite unique. I mean, we're lucky to have a guy who has energy and willingness to really drive it locally. Okay, now another highlight, this time bright silver highlight to this urn. And then I will do the blood effect. But for now it's just a highlight. Then maybe a glaze of black and yellow. Because I want this urn to be also metallic, also more towards the yellow brown range, but I don't want it to look like the mask. That's why I started the mask and painted it using more golden metallics rather than silver metallics. Okay. Now maybe a quick glaze of black. So null oil. But I'm going to apply it focusing more on the recessed areas than the raised ones. Okay, now it's time to actually take a step back. So I have 30 minutes left, which is ample time. I don't want to jump right into blood effects. I'd rather take my time and just fine-tune some things which could still be fixed. So maybe some slight highlight on the rope here. Maybe even here as well towards the arm. Light touch-ups on the skulls. And the same on this lady. And next, Waldo's Weekly is coming up tomorrow already, so we can expect hopefully some previews from Gen Cons, more previews, because we were told to stay tuned and expect more. So I'm expecting more. Maybe while I have the black, I can already add some black to the tips of the horns, just to keep them a bit darker, and then further reinforce that with black, just to keep them interesting and more complex. Actually, this goes pretty well, so I'll continue with the black towards the center of each of the horn, and maybe apply green black on the tips of the horns. You need it. You need knowledge about what's coming next. So do we all. If that's what you're referring to, then I'm in the same boat. Okay, and while I have this up, maybe I can paint just the whites of the eye. Because I would imagine that these guys are not, they no longer need pupils. Just the whites of the eyes are enough. They're like in this final stage of agony. So that should be just fine. Yeah, all the new shinies. We're still like 2.5 weeks away from Gen Con. Almost 3 weeks. More like 3 weeks. So there's still time. Actually, for the eyes, I will use something different. I will use a thematic blue just to give them a kind of glow and unnatural feel. Slightly thin it down with not necessarily saliva, but water. And just give them this unnatural saturation. Yeah, that does it. The same on the other one. And now for the yellow, I will just go with Nasdaq yellow. Right, 20 minutes. Should be enough. Because once I apply the effects for gore, it will just bring it all together. But for now, I just want to apply Nasdaq yellow because that will cover the previous highlights, but at the same time maintain the depth where the color is darker and where it should be brighter, and kind of filter it towards this beaten gold scope. Maybe I can add a touch of orange to that as well. That will come in a second. Maybe a very light touch of orange. Yeah, I'm in the same boat. Also, we are together with some buddies. We are going to probably make one larger order and split the costs of taxes and shipping, because they are pretty heavy on the wallet. So it's good to have people to chip in for that. Right, so now it's got this like old weathered look, and I think I'm ready for the blood. So let me make some space on my desk. Put aside colors which I'm not using at this exact moment. So a bit of cleanup, and almost ready for the final part. And the final part is the bloody part. So they look okay at this stage. Maybe I can actually, one more thing I can do, I can put some overbrush on the wings and then apply another light wash. So let's do that now. Why don't I do it now? Just to bring out the details on the wing membranes again, and then apply lighter shade of purple again, because otherwise this nicely defined texture on the wings will kind of disappear. I don't want that. I want it to be very much visible. And now for this part, I think I will choose Volupus Pink, or maybe Magus Purple. That's the one that seems to be more suitable. Because this one is not that heavy, and it will nicely bring it all together. That's what I wanted to see. Just a kind of final touch on the wings part. While still keeping the highlights visible. Okay, time for the blood. Now for blood, I will use blood for the blood gore, blood for the blood god, technical paint, and two more. All right. Hopefully we experience this improvement. And that's demon blood, and I think I also have some other blood paints. Let me just pull them up. They were somewhere here. Where do you think I have them? No, that's intensity ink. Where is my blood? Sorry guys, but I just need to find two colors which I might have misplaced. No. I mean, I can still go on with the ones I have, but those were quite neat. Let me just look for them. Alright, I have them. They are behind my screen, well hidden. So that's one. And there's another one. So I have 4 colors for the blood. Blood for the blood god, blood effect, and blood effect, true blood, and coagulated blood. I'll start with true blood, because that's the lightest shade. And that's the final 15 minutes of the stream. So good timing. Right on time for some blood. And I just go heavy with the blood here. I will also later on use a sponge and just dab it so that there are some random splatters of blood. But this makes it all come together. That was the overall idea for the composition. So dark frame with dark purple wings, cold, bright colors of the clothes and skin, and this vibrant blood, which is currently looks like human blood, but that will evolve, that will change very soon. So you see, I wasn't really too concerned about this neon yellow visible, because it's now getting all covered with this red, this magical blood effect that's going all over the unfortunate victim of the black blood ritual. But it's not black blood yet. For now, it's human red blood, but that will change within the next 10 minutes. Now time for the other guy. I think I like this one a bit more. Although both are very nice miniatures, the standing one seems just a bit more menacing for some reason. And also some blood around the arms. Just making sure that the blood is painted from the back of this part as well. Yeah, that's beginning to look appropriately gory. Now, using the same brush, I will just switch to blood for the blood god, which is much thicker. Blood is thicker than water, isn't it? And it's just much darker. So this part goes faster. I needed to be more careful about the application of the first color. Now it's going smoothly to the next one. And what will make it look demonic will be the third color that I will use, which is special effect. As you can see, it's super dark, but again, it has similar consistency. It's called Demon Blood, Sangre Demonica. Oh no, it's not good for me. No, but well, what can you do? Just trying not to suck on the brush right now. But here, for them, well, I guess they are beyond caring right now. The thing is that I need to wait for it to dry a little bit, so maybe I will move to the sponge and use a slightly different technique. So let me just grab a third piece of sponge. I mean, this is the kind of sponge that the miniatures are packed with. It's always worth keeping a little bit of it. And I will grab some trusted tools for the job. And essentially what I do now is I will just dab it into the blood and dab it onto the miniature. And that will create this random pattern that's really hard to replicate if you apply with the paint with brush. I need a smaller piece of that. Much smaller piece, which will make it easier to aim carefully for that part where I want it to be. You see, so that's like adds this nice, it's slightly purplish, but way darker. So adds this really mean streak to what we have already. And yeah, you could play with object source lighting, make some magical effects, but I'd rather have it more basic, more like blood that has a life of its own and just swirls around in some chaotic patterns. Just being careful not to put it on the Urnbearer. Ouch, now I applied quite a bit of it on the face where I don't necessarily want it that much. Okay, the face is cleared almost. I think I can now grab one more tiny bit of it. Yeah, we're almost done here. 5 more minutes, so yeah, I'll make it. I'll make it through. I'll make it in time. For now, I will just also reach to this mid-brown, mid-blood, which is this dark blood effect. And again, using the same dabbing technique, put some of it around the areas where the streaks of blood are just, because they look kind of attached to the body and I want their edges a bit more uneven. So almost done here. I mean, that looks crazy mean. What's happening to these guys? Surely wouldn't like to be part of that ritual. And then it's just a matter of painting the rim of the base and I call it done. Although I may just paint the rim of the base offline because it's not that relevant. Nothing to be learned from that section really. Just what everyone does. Pretty much everyone does it at the end anyways. Okay, we have 5 minutes. I can still paint the rim of the base. Let me just grab dark black, matte black. That's what I meant. So really solid matte color, and paint the rim of the base. I'll do it just holding miniature like that, because this is like a frame, and I typically want it very dark and matte for my miniatures, because that puts more of a spotlight on what's above the base, above the rim of the base. Okay, that one is done. I will showcase them in 2 minutes, because we have 6 minutes. No, we have 4 minutes left, so really rushing here now, but I'll make it. I will make it. I once painted 5 miniatures in one stream, so 2 shouldn't really be that challenging, although these are really finely detailed models, and I wanted to take my time to really make the most out of this session. A few dabs of maybe black even. All right, that's one, that's the other one. Let me just present to you the final effect for tonight. Once again, huge thanks to everyone who joined in, even for a brief time. Really appreciate you guys. Make sure to check in tomorrow for DAX stream. I'll just clear it a little bit because there was too much. And here we are, 2 Urnbearers. I think they turned out pretty, well, bloody nice. Let me put them to the focus. They look really dark, so the major part is, the mid part is bright, like some kind of priests, demonic priests, and dark wings, and a lot of blood. I will take good pictures tomorrow and showcase them to you, but thank you so much, guys, for following, for joining in the discussion. Really excited about Gen Con this year. See you in August in my next stream, and have a great rest of the day, night, morning, wherever you are. Take care. Bye.